Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Totalbiscuit, and welcome back to videos. I've been told that I do those. Now moved to the US, we still haven't got the studio fully the way that I want it, so you're going to hear quite a lot of reverb in the background, like, oh, this sounds like a very bare room. Kind of is. We're working on padding and screening off areas and so on and so forth. That's going to take a little bit of time to get rolling, but it will happen eventually. Anyway, this is the Tribes Ascend update for the Raid and Pillage patch, which just came in a few days ago, and its primary focus was to provide more options for the Raider class, one of those options being Get Blown Away by Afro Jesus. And this contains 3 new weapons. The one that you're seeing there is a remake of a classic gun from the original Tribes, which was the Plasma Gun. This is a medium rate of fire projectile weapon that fires a plasma bolt, and that has a small AoE explosion attached to it. It does about 500 damage on a direct hit, less obviously if you hit them with the splash. It's got 10 rounds in a clip, and this weapon is, even right now, I would say, overpowered. When it first came in, it was ridiculously overpowered. The most overpowered gun I've ever seen in Tribes by a very significant margin. And the simple reason for that was it had a very large hitbox, which meant that you could fire this thing in mid-air combat and get airmail all the time. Airmail, by the way, is the award, the little accolade that you get for killing somebody mid-air with an explosive-type weapon, as opposed to blue plate special, which is what you get if you hit them with a spin fuser type of weapon. It was ridiculous, honestly, absolutely ridiculous, and it was made all the worse by the fact that you don't have the same problems that you do with a spin fuser, because with a spin fuser, when you're trying to nail someone mid-air, if you miss, then that's really, really bad, because your actual refire time is very low in comparison to the plasma gun. If you miss with the plasma gun, it doesn't matter. It simply doesn't, because you can see the rate of fire right there. If you miss with one projectile, you don't have to reload the gun. You can just keep firing. So it's much, much easier to hit targets in midair with this thing. Now, they nerfed the gun in about a day, just like they did with the Jackal. You remember the Jackal had some real problems with the fact that it could airburst, and once again, that made it very, very powerful in midair combat, much better than a spin fuser. They nerfed this thing and reduced the hitbox significantly to the point where, from what I was reading on the Tribes Reddit, the actual projectile is now the same size as a bullet. So, hitbox-wise, it's not really easier to hit somebody in midair with this thing than it is with an actual bullet. We'll get back to balance momentarily, because the second weapon here, which is the secondary option for the Raider in the new update, is the NJ5B, which is a new submachine gun. Now, the purpose of that gun is to give you a more heavy-hitting option, as opposed to the NJ4, which is a very rapid-fire gun. It has a much, much slower rate of fire than the NJ4, but it does a lot more damage per bullet. Clip size is slightly smaller, not by much, but DPS-wise, they're roughly about equal. Calculations-wise, if you hit with every bullet, I believe you can get a kill about 0.5 seconds or so faster than you can with an NJ4. But that does involve hitting with every single bullet, which is not necessarily all that likely. You get punished much, much harder for missing with the NJ5B, but of course there are bigger rewards for getting reliable hits with that thing as well. As you can see, the weapon combo between the two is fairly effective, and it's not exactly what I would call hard to use. The plasma gun is absolutely fantastic indoors as well as it is outdoors. The splash is good enough to be very functional. The firing rate is nice as well. And it gives you the same kind of advantages indoors that you would get from a spin fuser, in that you've got that splash, and when somebody tries to jump, you can simply aim at the ceiling near them, and if you don't hit them, you're still going to hit them with the splash. So those kind of guns are very, very effective indoors, needless to say, just like the thumper type of weapons, the grenade launchers, and so on and so forth. But what you also have is this very, very high rate of fire, which means that your actual damage per second is massive in comparison to a spin fuser. And indoors, aiming doesn't really seem to be all that much of a problem. Even outdoors it isn't, as you can see. I'm able to consistently hit one after another, and then if I get to a distance, then I can switch to the NJ5B. I love this gun, by the way. I certainly don't think this gun is overpowered by any stretch. It seems to be pretty balanced, as far as I can tell, but it's just fantastic. It's more down to the fact that I think it's personal preference. Like, the rhythm with this gun, I much prefer to the NJ4. Just the firing rate is better. I feel that I can track a target and start to get more consistent hits much, much better than I can with the NJ4. Now, no doubt practiced raiders may disagree, but that's kind of the nature of a weapon, isn't it? It should be a side grade. It shouldn't be more powerful than the NJ4, especially when they're both designed for the same role, because that would be absolutely absurd. So I think they seem to have done a pretty good job balancing the NJ4 and the NJ5B. Alright, we're going to have a little bit of a look at some footage from other maps, which gives you a bit more of a rounded impression of what the plasma gun and the NJ5B are capable of, as well as, of course, the cluster grenades. So we're going to move on here to Sunstar and see what we can do here. So, Sunstar, as you are well aware, nice big open map. Too flat for my liking, honestly. Does have these large towers, which more often than not are used to, one, jump off and gain speed, and two, to actually snipe from. But what I can demonstrate here is the fact that this gun is really not very good for taking out base defenses, which does bring up a fairly concerning point, in my honest opinion, that of the role of the Raider. The Raider is designed to disrupt enemy defenses. Now, that might mean it goes and takes out the generator, but more to the point, it often means clear the flag stand, destroy the turrets, destroy the radar sensor. Now, as you can see here, this is the amount of damage this thing actually does to a armored target. Not a lot. Its DPS is terrible against any kind of armored target. It's not very good against tanks and vehicles. It's not very good against radar sensor and deployable base turrets. It's not particularly good against the generator either. For that, you want to be using the Arcs Buster, honestly, and the Arcs Buster is by far the most fantastic weapon for doing that kind of thing. For precision hits, of course, the plasma gun is fantastic. If you need to take out Doombringers, for instance, like I just showed you there, that's a good weapon for making sure you get the kill, but you can still disrupt the flag stand much, much better than Arcs Buster, or even arguably a grenade launcher, depending on how good your aim is. Now, in terms of disruption, you also have this cluster grenade, which is the third and final weapon. I'm still in two minds about this, because the whiteout grenade is so good, in my honest opinion. Whiteout is just absolutely fantastic for causing all sorts of problems, especially indoors. I find if you hit someone with a whiteout grenade, they often just stop moving entirely because they can't see a damn thing. So picking them off is very, very easy. Also good for making sure that those defending a flag stand, like say a heavy on flag, can't actually see you, or indeed anybody else trying to get nearby. So the whiteout grenade is just an awesome weapon. I'm not so keen on the EMP grenade, although of course it does do a hell of a lot more damage than whiteout. Whiteout almost does no damage whatsoever. That's not what it's designed to do. The cluster grenade explodes, and then you get these 5 little bomblets which bounce around a bit, and then they explode too. It's a very kind of random area denial weapon. If you're looking for precision, you're not going to get it with this, because it has a tendency to bounce around in some unpredictable directions. But what you've effectively got is the Raider equivalent of a fractal grenade. Not quite as good, in my honest opinion, but good for area denial and good for flag clearing. Once again, the Raider is designed to actually clear flag stands, disrupt enemy defenses. The cluster grenade is great for that, even if just because of the fear value associated with it. When people see a cluster grenade coming in, they try to get the hell out of the way because it is very, very destructive. It's essentially a smaller MIRV. I do particularly like it on Sunstar for this reason, because look at the amount of damage you can do to an enclosed flag point like that. You can completely clear it. The cluster grenade also does good damage to deployables, so it will clear mines, force fields, and turrets very, very effectively. It can be used in the gen room as well. It does pretty good damage to a generator, but once again, the unreliable sort of randomish nature of the way the bomblets works does make it a little bit difficult. Alright, time for a little bit of Rain Dance, I think, which is a good map to demonstrate the plasma gun and the NJ5B in open field combat. You can, of course, disrupt the flag point here as well. It's a very open flag point on top of a tower, so you don't necessarily need a Raider to do that. More often than not, Pathfinders coming in will actually hit the flag point with either an impact nitron to knock a heavy off the flag point, or will of course use the spin fuse to try and do the same thing. You'll notice, of course, there's nothing to disrupt there, so there's no point in me even being there. So I can do some open field combat, or I can head into the generator room and make use of the cluster grenades. I do still have some real concerns about this plasma gun, though. I mean, I prefer the NJ5B as just a straight-up weapon, certainly, but I don't think it's a good idea to discount just how powerful the plasma gun actually is. It hurts like hell. It's much, much easier to aim than a spin fuser simply because you have a more forgiving rate of fire with it. If you miss with the spin fuser, you have that reload time, and you simply don't have that with the plasma gun. As far as I'm concerned, what the plasma gun probably needs to bring it in line with the rest of the weapons are either a slower projectile speed than it already has. I mean, it does have a slower projectile speed than the spin fuser. I will definitely give it that, but you can still hit with a fair amount of accuracy with the damn thing. I think also it needs just a shorter range in general. It's shorter than the spin fuser now, but I think it needs to be even shorter than that, because if you've got a raider with a plasma gun and you've got a soldier with a spin fuser fighting it out in midfield, theoretically speaking, if you're looking at class roles, I would say the soldier should win that fight, but he doesn't. Two equally skilled combatants, it's gonna be the raider that wins, because the raider's got much, much more consistent damage coming out from the plasma gun when you're fighting in midair. Yes, you can hit in midair with the spin fuse as well, and if you do with a direct hit, it's gonna do significantly more damage than plasma, but you've got way, way more opportunities with the plasma to actually hit. What I think you could do to balance that out is you could nerf the range of the plasma significantly, and it would make it more of a short-range weapon, which means that as the soldier, the way to actually engage versus a plasma gun raider would be to extend the distance somewhat, and at high speed, of course, with projectile inheritance, you can then more accurately hit with the spin fuser, and you'll be outside of the range of the plasma gun, forcing the raider to either try and close the distance, disengage entirely, or use their NJ4 or NJ5B to actually fight you with there as well. So I think that would probably help things out a little bit. I'm not 100% sure if even that would actually fix it, because there's all sorts of issues at the moment with the way that the plasma gun is implemented. It's a nice weapon, but it's just too much. Having the ability to hit that hard so frequently in mid-air combat is really, really powerful. The way that a low-level player, which I'm a low-level player, tends to fight is with a spin fuser type weapon. They wait for the opponent to hit the ground, or more accurately, they predict when the opponent's going to hit the ground and where. They fire their shot off as they are landing, so that they land directly on top of the spin fuser projectile, and then that's how they fight. More skilled players will go more often than not for more mid-air hits, because that means there's less combat downtime, as I like to call it, where you're not being able to output damage to your opponent. Now, of course, the way to fix that would be to use bullet-style weapons, like, say, the NJ5, the Eagle Pistol, or anything like that, and that will give you the ability to fight in mid-air as well. But if you can fight in mid-air with a much more powerful weapon that hits much harder, then that makes you a dominant force in dueling. That's what the plasma gun allows you to do right now, and it doesn't have enough disadvantages to properly balance it. The other problem I've got is that it just disrupts the role of the raider to the point where the raider essentially becomes a soldier with a shield pack, which makes things all the more hectic, honestly. You can do what a soldier can do, and I think the only disadvantage you've really got versus a soldier, aside from the fact that I think the soldier's anti-personnel grenades are absolutely amazing, is the fact that you don't have as much mobility because you don't have a spin fuser, so you can't disc jump. Also, you've got less energy, so you're going to burn through your jetpack energy much faster, plus both the packs for the raider do burn energy, so you're not going to be hopping around anywhere near as much as a soldier can. So that's my problem with it at the moment. You can't really blow up base defenses. The raider's role really is to disrupt enemy defenses. The plasma gun doesn't lend itself well to doing that, as opposed to the grenade launcher and the arcs buster, which both do, but also have these distinct disadvantages in certain kinds of combat. So hopefully they can do something about that. I also kind of have this concern. This is something that's been raised a few times on various forums and things like that. I don't know just how true this really is, but this is now the second time where we've got an update with a primary weapon that has been obviously overpowered. And I think the plasma gun actually was even worse than the Jackal. At least the Jackal required some degree of finesse, and it was a different kind of weapon. It required quite a lot of practice to use. Here, though, the plasma gun really doesn't. It doesn't require a lot of practice to really use at all. It's more forgiving than the spin fuser type weapons. And then, of course, after that, it got nerfed. And there are concerns that Hi-Rez is releasing guns that are too powerful on launch to try and get these initial early sales and then nerfing them directly afterwards. I don't see any evidence of that, but even if that's not the case, and I, again, don't really think that it is, it does indicate some kind of weird disconnect with Hi-Rez in that they didn't realize that this weapon was overpowered. How did you not realize that this weapon was overpowered? And the same with the Jackal, really. The plasma gun's just even more blatant. And it's just like, what? Really? It's obvious that this gun is massively overpowered. All you need to do is get into Arena or whatever, and you'll see that. Admittedly, I don't think we should be balancing around Arena, because it's kind of a joke mode, in my honest opinion. It's just for messing around, and yes, of course, it's skillful, but Capture the Flag is the primary mode of Tribes. It always has been. It's the competitive mode, so I think we should be balancing around that. But Arena is a good opportunity to see just how good a gun is in a dueling scenario, which involves a lot of mid-airs. And there were so many air mails being done, mid-air kills all the time with this gun. Initial videos that came out of it just indicated how massive the hitbox was. Can you really make that kind of mistake? Where's the internal testing going in this? Because I don't think this is a very, very good model to use. More to the point, I think that if you keep doing this, you're going to run into a lot of problems with your free-to-play model. It disrupts the competitive scene, obviously, but more to the point, it comes down to people are going to stop buying guns on release, and they're going to get sick of paying for your weapons, and that's where your income is coming from. So, to me, it seems like they should maybe be dialing this back somewhat, even reducing the price of guns and focusing their business model around actual microtransaction. I've said this before, and to their credit, after the first update, the Infiltrator update, they did reduce the prices. Not as much as I think they should have, but they did actually reduce the prices. I feel that they should be working on genuine microtransactions which are cosmetic. I'm thinking stuff like particle effect and thruster effect. That's actually the biggest thing, because the coolest thing that I see with these new skins, mostly it's the premium ones, like the Griever, which is the premium skin that comes with this update, and the Assassin that came with the last one. They both have different thruster colors, which is the coolest thing about them. You know? The rest of it doesn't really matter. It's the actual thruster color that's the greatest thing. So, in my opinion, they should be actually selling different thruster colors, or different thruster effects. That should be something that they should be focusing on. They should also be looking at particle effects for different weapons. Like, okay, my spin fuser fires a blue. I would prefer it to fire an orange. Can I do that? Is there any in-game reason not to do that? Not necessarily. I feel that some people may end up complaining that, oh, it's more difficult to distinguish what class I'm fighting against, but I honestly think that you can do that just fine with sound. You can easily tell what kind of spin fuser you're being shot by because they all have different sounds. Indeed, pretty much all of the weapons have different sounds, so people should be relying on that, not what the actual projectile looks like. Just something to consider. That was a look at the Raid and Pillage update, ladies and gents. My name has been Totalbiscuit, and I will see you next time.